Got another ZVP for you here. Hope you guys liked the ZVT we watched last game. I thought, or last cast, I thought that one was really fun. Let's first do the introductions. Got a few things I want to say after that. Okay, so I'm the Zerg player, Rekatan, in the top right as the red Zerg. Lower left, right now green, normally going to be blue. Don't panic, the blue Protoss. So we've got a ZVP here, and to kind of preface this for anyone starting and they want to see what they're going to be watching, this one is going to be a Skytoss game. Sorry if there's spoilers for anyone there, but I try to make these more for analysis rather than, well, try to be entertaining too, but you get the idea. But I've had tons of questions about how to deal with High Templar in any form of Skytoss. So I was kind of waiting for a perfect example, because the last game where they went Skytoss that I cast, it was the first time I'd ever seen High Templar plus carriers, because it was right after the patch, and I got absolutely rolled by it. So now we're going to see the solution, because you saw me lose to it. Now we'll see how it works. So we got a pylon going down from Don't Panic, and there's the gateway. So this is some interesting pressure. I don't spot it here for a while. We'll go on my view so we can kind of see the reaction when I see it, because I find that to be kind of an interesting thing to look at for a player, is see what their first reaction is to something like this. Before things get too crazy, I wanted to mention, I noticed my last YouTube cast got like quadruple the views it normally does. I really appreciate you guys passing that around. That's so cool of you. You know, I just it's one thing for me to play StarCraft, and I love the game one way or the other, but you guys watching on YouTube or on Twitch, you guys are what make this really special for me, so I appreciate it. So yeah, definitely thank you for that. Now that the warm and fuzzies are out of the way, let's look at this. We've got an 11 over pool for me, and then I go ahead and hit that extractor trick. Now the nice thing is, I already kind of got some spider sense because the probe showed up really early. Now, if something seems off, either the probe never scouts or the probe arrives too early, I forego the 16th drone and extractor trick out 2 sets of Zerglings rather than just 1. And that makes all the difference in the world in a situation like this, because he's going to apply a little pressure with this zealot and probe, but I can snipe the probe here, didn't lose a Zergling, and really I just got to make sure the spine finish is intact. So this is just 1 gate rather than 2, so technically this isn't all in, and that's one really important thing to note here. Alright, second zealot arrives. I pushed that creep tumor out a little too far. I was hoping he was going to hang back and wait for maybe 3 zealots, but he came right up as soon as he was on 2. And that creep tumor needs to get to the front door as soon as possible. I need to be able to break this so I can take my natural. So that's actually really important, that creep tumor died. That actually really helps him out a lot, because that gives him a little more time to do that. So now he's taking a quicker natural than me, which is always something good for Protoss, and that's why he's not all in right now. Alright, gonna pull the drones. I really feel like I need to go ahead and shut this down now. Let's, whoa, Control-Shift-R. There it is, that's Alt-Shift-R. Let's see what he killed. 4 drones. I feel good about that. Could have been better, but my micro was decent. It wasn't perfect, but still, 4 drones for 3 zealots, I like it. I was dropping a Roach Warren. I was hoping to do some counter pressure. Then I realized once he lost all those zealots, he was going to go straight into cannons, and sure enough, there's our forge. The Roach counter pressure is not going to do anything since he's no longer producing zealots. He's going to just drop cannons and hold just fine. We'll shut that down. Sorry, I'm trying to drink something at the same time as this, and it's not working. Okay, you know what? I'm putting my cup down. This is the worst cast ever. Okay, so I'm taking a 3rd up top. I find this is a little less scouted in situations like this. Normally you'd want to take here, but that's oftentimes scouted right away. Supply block on 26, because I'm really bad. So don't do that. Don't reproduce that. That's a good example of what not to do. Zergling's out. I'm going to go ahead and clean up the gateway and pylon and get a little map control. Now, he's actually scouting this perfectly. Now, I don't know what the spider sense was for him that caused this, because typically you're going to go south and scout the vertical 3rd rather than the horizontal 3rd. But good call on his part, and he's going to go ahead and pile on that. And my Overlord, this path is horrible. Actually, that one's not on a path, but this one should have been hanging out up at my 3rd, keeping an eye out, because it's not uncommon at all for a player who's going for this kind of opening to kind of keep the cheesiness alive. It's not quite... I wouldn't call it cheese, actually. A lot of people would, but it's more just the gimmicky play that you know, some Protoss players really rely on, and it's all well and good for them, because I'm sure a lot of times they just completely shut down a Zerg player with this kind of stuff, especially if they're greedy hatch timing macro players. So this one, with 8 Zerglings out on the field, I should have not taken any damage from this, but fortunately he commits to 2 cannons rather than just 1, which he needed to since he saw Zerglings. My hatch finishes, I see it, I go, oh, that really sucks. Pull back my drones, and this is a really important decision here. With 2 cannons, it's probably not going to be cost effective for me to save this. I mean, I could take both my queens, have them make this really long crawl over, maybe get there in time, maybe not, and probably lose some Zerglings as well. Altogether, I'm going to miss a ton of injections because I had to pull my queens. I'm going to probably lose some Zerglings. And just the resource commitment's huge. So don't let this kind of thing panic you, because if we look at his investment, he's got 2 cannons and a pylon for a grand total of 400 resources. I, on the other hand, spent 1 drone and a hatchery for a total of 350 resources, and once I get this main transferred, which I really should get around to, I'm not to the point that mining efficiency is a factor. So if I was at, 60 drones and I really needed that 3rd up, and I really needed to save it so that I could transfer drones to keep my mining efficiency straight, then that would be a factor. But at this stage, that actually brought me 50 minerals. Maybe if we factor a little bit of larva production, we broke even. But, and do not reproduce these supply blocks. If I remember right, this was like the last game of the day, so I was pretty zonked. I've noticed the first game of the day and the last game of the day, I'll supply block pretty hard. It's not until like 3 games in that I get really clean, and then after about 8 hours straight of playing, I really get bad about it. We're looking at 3 base now versus 2 base Protoss. He's going into Stargate, and it looks like he's going to be massing out some oracles, so that's really good. This as a follow-up is going to be strong, simply because he's going to be able to shut down the 3rd if it's not scattered. Now, let's look and see where I'm at as far as the pneumatized carapace. That's the important timing here for my play. Typically, is the moment pneumatized carapace is finished, that's when I'll go ahead and get some scouting. Now, in a normal game, that would have been done a minute and a half ago, but this is a far from normal game, so I'm going to be a little late scouting these oracles, and we already see a fleet beacon, so already we're able to see he's going into more than likely Carrier High Templar. You don't typically rush Tempest in this situation. They don't do very well unless you're already on 3 base economy. Carrier, on the other hand, now that they're easily microed, do phenomenal in small numbers, as long as you've kept their queen count low, which that's what these oracles will hopefully do. Either shut down my drones or kill some queens. So immediately pulling back, let's see that transfuse, good. And now he goes for the drones as he should, cuts his losses, and says, okay, I already used some energy, let's try and get some drones. Optimally, he would have gotten that oracle out, but no such luck. So far, doing really well keeping those drones alive. Let's see here. Lost 5 drones for 2 oracles is a great trade any day. Obviously the perfectionist says, well, let's make sure we lose no drones, but really unlikely. I mean, if they want to kill some drones, they're probably gonna. Oracles are fast and high DPS, and that combination means that they're guaranteed damage. They're just not guaranteed to be cost effective. And in this case, they weren't cost effective, so that's as good as I can really hope for. These Zerglings, I'd like to have them out on the map. This is a stage in the game when I don't typically have a lot of Zerglings, maybe 2, probably even lost those. So, kind of out of my element here. Especially ZVP, I'm finding idle Zerglings is a problem because I don't typically have them, so times when I'm forced to make them, I don't really know what to do with them. ZVT, it makes a lot of sense for me, but ZVP, it's like, wait, I don't make these anymore. Economy-wise, we're looking pretty good. 56 drones on 3 base to 50 probes on almost 3 base. Going to be 3 base soon. He's got his 2 carriers out, so that's looking excellent for him. And let's see what I've seen so far, because that's always interesting. So my scouting's super late here. Because I was working on those oracles, I never actually got the Overseer in. And that's an important thing. Even though I saw the oracles, I don't know if it's 1 Stargate or 2. I don't know if he's transitioned out into Colossus. I really have no idea what's going on here. I just know that he made 2 oracles, which I killed, so there may be absolutely no airplay remaining. The other thing I needed to improve here was this 3rd needed an Overlord. We got Overlords camping around the rest of the map, but for whatever reason, there was nothing there, and that's going to be his natural 3rd. So that didn't make a lot of sense on my part. Even if I was occupied with the oracles, I should have had that Overlord in position long ago. And especially since he didn't make any Phoenix, it's going to take him a while to shut that down. Alright, so since I'm still thinking he's probably getting some air, I'm getting the Hydras already. I'm not going to commit too terribly heavy to them. Let's see what my production is. 4. So yeah, I'm just getting a little buffer just in case, and then I'll switch into the Swarmhost production. Keep the production tab up for the rest of this since people typically like that. I like the income tab. I find it's a little more telling, but to each their own. Everyone likes the production tab, so that's what I'll leave up. Now, the double Evo chamber, really late, but given that he opened air, it stands to reason that he's not going to have the fastest upgrades, and there we have it. His +1 melee already is finally starting, and that was probably 6 minutes later than your standard Protoss. But given the kind of wonky game we've had where he's hitting a series of timings, that's going to work out just fine, so I was able to delay my Evo chambers without being punished for it. With Swarmhosts, if you can get double upgrades earlier rather than later, that's phenomenal, but it's not mandatory. I find sometimes it's better to have 3 extra Swarmhosts so that you reach critical mass sooner than 1 sooner. So it's just kind of a matter of preference, but more often than not, I think the earlier Swarmhost is a more versatile way to go. Alright, so he's still just scouting with these hallucinated Phoenix, which is actually a really good play because that tells the Zerg player that your opponent is done with air. And so that actually, especially in a case like this where I'm being very lazy with my scouting, that can throw them for a loop. Now, this drop is going to double his scouting, so that's nice for me. Getting rid of those Zerglings, really important. Also dropping some Hydras. I find when you are fairly certain your opponent is at least still committing to some kind of Stargate play, you can go ahead and do this, but if they've even just made any Stargates at all, it's going to be a good way to go. Good safe route, kind of high percentage kind of deal. So even if you don't necessarily know that they're entirely committed, even though my Locust did see it earlier, this is still a great way to go when they've already opened air. Alright, so pulling back here, you don't want to directly engage these. I was hoping to catch him a little off guard in the multitasking, which I did. I got a few free probes there before he pulled out. And so that made that a pretty good exchange. Alright, so the moment you see that Zealot warping, you want to go ahead and load up as much as you can, optimally everything, and go ahead and move right along. Now, one really cool play if you see the Zealots moving out is you can actually just drop some at the main and pull back and drop at the natural again the moment you see mining resumed. I didn't do that because I was busy down here, which I should have caught. Sorry, this is going to be kind of hard to cast without some kind of picture-in-picture fanciness, because there's a lot of multitasking in this game. Hopefully, there we go, pick up and get back again. So I'm just cutting his army, trying to get him split up as much as possible while getting some of that economy taken care of as well. So I'm up to 10 drone or probe kills. That's all I really need for this to be cost effective. These extra probes, those are gravy. So that really did its job, believe it or not. He handled it really well. It could have won the game outright. That kind of drop play really can, but really it just needed to pull his army back by a little more time to get my Swarmhost going. So notice I'm low on Swarmhost count, and this is because once you realize they're carrier, you just want to make enough Swarmhosts to shut down the Zealots and High Templar. That's what he's going to be at late game. It's going to be Charge Lot, High Templar, and then everything else into carrier. The remaining is going to go into Hydra Queen and tons of Spores. The reason for that is because there's going to be a point when he says, oh great, I'm at critical mass, let's push. And unfortunately for Zerg right now, if we're at 200 supply and they're at 200 supply, we physically do not have an anti-air unit that's going to trade cost effectively versus Protoss air. So we have to get a little creative. We have to find ways of tipping the balance in our favor from a supply standpoint, and that's what Spores do for us. Now, the other thing that can be done here is obviously continuing the drop play. That's something that should be done all throughout the game, unless you just see a huge mass of cannons, at which point you can just shut down their third because they don't have enough minerals tied up in Zealots to buffer the Locusts. But what we're going to see here is the Locusts bait out the Interceptors, which then allows my Hydras and Queens to take pot shots at them. Believe it or not, this adds up in a big way. You're going to kill Interceptors, your goal at least, is to kill Interceptors faster than they can be reproduced, until eventually you've got the ability to move out. So notice there, we're probably looking at, it's hard to really tell, I wish I had a count, but we're probably looking at 16 or so Interceptors killed just in that one run. 10 to 16, somewhere in that range. All the while I'm getting more probe kills. So taxing is multitasking, denying some mining. This allows me to continue building up my mass and continue to play a very safe macro. This isn't something where I'm going for tons of drones, 68 drones. And all the while I'm making tons of Spores across the map, making tons of spines. I'm just trying to make sure I don't lose. That's it. And other than that, I feel like time is on my side, actually, not the other way around. He gives me a couple free Oracles. Big miss micro on his part. He really needed those, because that's what's going to shut down the Hydras being able to clean up Interceptors. Alright, he finally gets those Hydras cleaned up over at the main. There was only one left, if I recall, so it wasn't able to do too much damage. But again, just repeating this process. And if we look at losses, I'm sure we're probably pretty tied right now. Actually, no, he's quite a bit behind me. And really, I just want to break even, but if I'm able to pull ahead versus Carrier High Templar, then that's great, because it's such a cost-effective composition. So we're already seeing the Interceptor starting to get a little thin, and this means I can get more and more aggressive with this pushing. I'm going to probably want to bounce these Swarmhosts up a little further so they don't expire as quickly, and then just start actually doing some real economic damage here. This is when the upgrades become really important. You're going to need to go ahead and be ready for him to start getting pretty upgrade heavy on his air. Let's see, what are we at? Actually, I can't see because it's under construction. So he's already at +3 attack on his Interceptors, which is great, but they still suck at killing Locusts. So that's the thing. There's just so many targets for Locusts that Interceptors never are going to do a good job at cleaning them up. Alright, so he reveals his High Templar. This is great time for it. Notice I have Burrow. This is to allow the Locust to pass if I ever get to a large Swarmhost count, which I may or may not. There we go, 6 more Swarmhosts immediately once I realize he's on High Templar. And that's the really important part about this composition. Your High Templar are actually going to be what, or your Swarmhosts are actually going to be what shut down the High Templar from getting close enough to storm or feed back the Queens and Hydras. So immediately I'm going to pull back. He misses a storm. So in this case, what happens is I do have to pull back because my Locusts don't zone out his High Templar, but in the process he's going to lose a Carrier, he's losing tons of Interceptors, and he lost almost his entire ground army. So even though I wasn't able to zone out those High Templar, the trade was really bad for him. Really, really bad. See, I'm already, or I'm still pulling ahead even though he cleaned up all those spores. And this is just going to be a very gradual situation where my supply is constantly ahead and his is constantly behind. So here we go, more Locusts coming out. He's way back on his High Templar, but that means I get those Stalkers for free. I found a lot of people when they're committed to Carriers, they tend to not really micro their buffer units, which is, I don't know what to say about that. If they've got other places to put their micro, like their Carriers and High Templar, then great. But oftentimes that's not the case. Alright, so that's what you want to happen. So he pulls up, gets some beautiful storms, and the Swarmhosts are right behind ready to spawn. And he lost every single High Templar as a result. Now, he could have probably handled that a little better, but I doubt he could have hit those storms without losing a good chunk of his High Templar. It's just, there's just no way. And if we were to do a cost-benefit on that, he's definitely making bad trades, especially when you look at all those Interceptors that died. Once they're low on the Interceptor count, which you see he is, you can continue to push out. They don't have that critical mass of Interceptors to be able to deploy them without taking significant losses. So you continue moving out. If he stops for a second, which results in his Interceptors deploying, and then moves away, the new Carrier micro says that they will not go back into the Carriers, which actually is phenomenal. You're taking advantage of what was a buff, because now those Interceptors are going to stick around, keep trying to do damage, and as long as you hit some transfusions, you're going to clean up all the Interceptors for free. So that's a good way to turn what was a buff to Carriers against them when you already see a low Interceptor count. Now he's back to full, so I'm going to have to resume the spawn Locusts and push with Hydra's cycle. Got a couple Hydras here dropping out. This is something that, like I said, needs to be continued all game. Finally got the Viper transition. Now notice this was incredibly late, and actually my cue to make Vipers was when I saw his High Templar count reset. If I hadn't cleaned up his High Templar, I would have stayed on Queen Hydra Swarmhost. That's just because you're going to get a lot of feedbacks. You may still get something cost-effective, but it's a bit of a gamble compared to what I consider to be guaranteed damage. Sorry for not catching that. I'm a bad caster, and I'm proud of it. Basically, we just interrupted a probe transfer, kept him from getting his 4th. Alright, so we got a little bit of energy on these Vipers. We're ready to move out. Now, another thing is, let's look at the health here. We want... actually, I'm a little high on health. Optimally, you want to be under 150 health when you move in for your Abduct, so that they can hit feedback before you abduct and you still won't lose them. Now in this case, he can hit a feedback after the abduct and I won't lose it. So that's still pretty good. But optimally you want to be at like 140 energy when you go up for that. And that means you can still hit your abduct and hit a second one very shortly after without ever being at risk of a one-shot from the feedback. Alright, so he's got some defensive Dark Templar. That's something I actually didn't notice until I watched the replay. I was just kind of like, wait, why are my Hydras getting cleaned up so easily? But between losing that transfer and the drop play, still doing some reliable damage. We're now 40 drones to 65, or 65 drones to 40 probes. So this is just a war of attrition. But because of the Locust cleaning up High Templar, Zealots, and the Hydras occasionally taking pot shots at the Interceptors, well, look at those losses. Even though he's been very aggressive, and I'm ahead on economy, he's also behind on unit efficiency. So this is all really going the way I want it to. A few little miss micros on my part once in a while, but nothing major. Alright, so in the process of cleaning up these spores, we have another case where he gets his interceptor count reset to a large degree. Tons of cleanups. That one's empty, that one's half, that one's at 3/4, and I mean, that's really all it takes. That means I've got an angle here that I can attack from, where this carrier is a liability rather than help. So that's going to be a cleanup. There it goes. He's getting a good storm, but again, look at that. He gets a good storm off, 2 good storms off, and loses all his High Templar for it. And that's what you want. You always just want to make sure you've got Locust cutting off the retreat. There we go. He GG's out, and that's the game. So really micro-intensive. That much is, obvious. So micro-intensive that I choose not to spare any multitasking for production when I am in the middle of a micro, because it's really important you don't get hit by some nasty feedbacks. You don't hang out in a storm for too long. You got to make sure you make you rally your Locust to the right location to make sure they're cutting off High Templar's retreat. So this is just another case where Swarmhost based play is breaking the rules for Zerg. You're not focusing on macro over micro. You're not allowing yourself to drone up to 80 or 70, because that's probably too many. That's probably not going to give you critical mass on your Swarmhost. So don't be afraid to go ahead and let your resources slip. If you hadn't GG'd out, then I go ahead and go, okay, 4S, H, and max out again. But until the micro's over, until you have nothing engaging, you cannot risk getting some nasty storms on your Swarmhosts, or some good feedbacks on your Queens. Those Queens are really important. So I guess that's about all there is I can say on that, but given that this was such a heavily requested subject, I figured this was a great example, because he played it really well, and his opening did throw me off quite a bit. Even though I was able to macro out of it comfortably, we were probably on equal grounds there. So for my next games, I've been playing a lot of, or casting a lot of losses. I'm going to try or wins, yeah. God, I can't talk today. I'm going to try and cast some losses and look at what I can do better, particularly ZVT. I feel like now I have my ZVT solidified. I know my timings. I know where I want to go with it. But there's those little mistakes, like, oh god, I forgot to make my second round of Spores and Spines in my main, so his Doom Drop cleaned out my main. And a lot of times I can still win the game when he takes my main, just because Swarmhosts are so cost effective, but in a perfect world I don't want that to be occurring. And if that means 6 Spores at my main because I can't spare my army to defend, then so be it. So we're going to look at some games where that occurs, and I'm sure some of that will occur today, so that'll give me some fodder for the next replays. Alright guys, thanks for watching everyone on YouTube.